Hi, and welcome back to my YouTube channel. So in this video I'm going to be showing you the guidelines for research at the master's level. This is a brief document that I've prepared um, for helping my students in my department, in my university, on how to go about their research uh, dissertation. Um, the purpose of this document is to help you understand how to write a research proposal, what is the ideal outline of a thesis, the process of research itself, and then quickly the timeline which everyone should follow. So this is how the research proposal format should generally look like. I've just given a small example over here: the name of the university, department, the title, and by whom the research is by, and then the designation. Now, when you look at the research proposal, we have different parts. We have introduction, review of literature, objectives, conceptual framework, and so on. To start with, we have the introduction, where the researcher will introduce the reader to the topic. Basically, the researcher will help the reader understand why the particular study is being conducted. In other words, the magnitude of the importance of the study. So the researcher must try and convince the reader that the topic is truly important and must support his or her argument through valid statistics and citations. Then we move on to the review of literature and research gap. So once the concept and the problem has been defined, we move on to what is already known by examining the review of literature and also identifying the research gap. So the reason we do a review of literature is to identify what is already known about the topic and then provide a research gap. Now, since this is a research proposal, only a few number of studies are sufficient, and then a decent research gap identifying what is not known and what the researcher is aiming to fill through their research is discussed here. So from the research gap, we have something called the objectives of the study. So the objectives of the study must be explained in points, and it should be easy to understand, like this over here. Once the objectives are defined, we move on to the conceptual framework. So what is the conceptual framework? The conceptual framework is a diagrammatic representation of the variables in the study. So in this case, we have three major variables. Two of them are independent variables and one is the dependent variable. Domestic violence and poor social support are the independent variables, and depression is the dependent variable. That means depression is dependent on domestic violence and poor social support in this scenario. Okay, so this is how a diagrammatic representation of the variables are mentioned. It's also known as the conceptual framework. Now, in some cases, you may also have a theoretical framework. So theoretical framework is very useful because it helps you establish some of those hypotheses in your studies. More importantly, the theoretical framework lays down the foundation for your study. In fact, some experts believe that the ultimate goal of research is not just to come up with findings, but to either prove or disprove a theory so that it can contribute to the growth of the discipline. So a theoretical framework which is generally recommended, but it's optional. Then you have something called the methodology section, wherein you talk about all the key aspects of your study, such as your sample size, your research design, the tools of data collection, and how the data is going to be analyzed. So here I've given a sample of methodology, you can see here, and I've also mentioned the research design, tools of data collection, data analysis, and references. Now references can be in any format. In this case, I've given it in APA format. If your university is following a different format, then you should be following that. So this is basically how the outline of the thesis looks like. I've just given a small example of the front page, the certificate, the declaration form that is usually included, and then you have something called the certificate of plagiarism test. Now every university has its own level. Here I've mentioned that the plagiarism level should not exceed 20%, but it could be a different level for your university. So please do check with your university about that. Then you have the table of contents, where we discuss the different contents of the thesis: introduction, review, methodology, results and discussion, major findings, conclusion and suggestions, and then the references. Again, I have mentioned that it should be in APA format. It could be any format that your university is following. You might have annexure 1, 2 and 3. Here you should include your scale, your interview schedule, your abbreviations and pictures. that are associated with the study. So here you have the list of tables, list of diagrams, acknowledgement, and abstract. So usually abstract gives a summary of your entire study. This should not exceed an entire page. So that's usually the rule. I mean, that's followed in most universities and colleges. Now, when you look at the rules to note for the thesis, now these are something that you can basically share with your students. Plagiarism is an unethical practice in research. You're not, expected to do that. Remember to cite and refer your sources. Follow the time schedule to avoid last-minute problems. So I have given a rough timeline on how the thesis should be carried out over the year. Meet your research guide on a regular basis and keep record of the things being discussed. A copy of the a copy of the guidelines will be with the research guide, so please check with them. So I recommend all the research guides to have a copy of the guidelines with them. The final draft of the thesis will be checked for plagiarism. The maximum permissible limit is 20%. Again, as I said, this is for this university and this department. Now look at the process. I've mentioned how the entire process works so that students get a brief outline of what the whole thesis is about. So you have chapter 1 is about introduction, chapter 2 is about review of literature, chapter 3 is about methodology, chapter 4 is results and discussion, chapter 5 is major findings, suggestions and conclusion. Now the overall timeline is like this. This is the timeline that I have given for my students. This timeline is helpful to ensure that the students are on track. So if you can share the timeline well before the students begin the thesis, then you can expect them to finish their dissertation on time. So that's about it. I hope you found this video useful. If you did, please do like and subscribe. More importantly, I've shared the link of this document in the description and also in the comment section. So please, if you're interested, you're free to use this for your own research. And if you're a faculty in a university who's guiding a master's level student, I hope you find it useful as well. So thanks for watching and bye for now.